We're still missing a few people. We're missing John Woods and who else on the Dustin Handy, Bob Miller. Okay, so we're still missing 3 voting members, but we'll go ahead and get started. Approval of the minutes for March the 16th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
Okay.
I would move here, but I second.
Okay.
With the day for Alex.
Are there any amendments, corrections, additions, deletions? No? Okay, all in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Okay, and abstentions? I think we need to have Hannah abstain and Ben Lastimato and Bob Bell. Okay. Speaking of Hannah Israel, Hannah is the new member of the committee to replace Daniela, and welcome to Hannah.
As we now have.
Now we've got it. We've got more than a quorum. We're just missing John Woods, I guess. Okay. There's no public, so there's no public comment. Budget update. Let me do the budget update if I can have the lights just dim. Now this might not be the handiest thing in the world to see that screen. Can everybody see that okay? Yes? Or you want the lights dimmed even more? It's okay? All right, this is basically a presentation that was done for the Board of Trustees the other day, and then there's some additional things for Brac at the end that the board has not seen. So let me just go through this. And some of this stuff we've already seen, but in terms of others and members of the public who have not seen the actual documents, this might be a way of doing it. So this is the distinction between sections and enrollments. So what I've said, and I did a handout previously, but not in PowerPoint, is that you can have 2 sections, and while they sound exactly the same, they're not. You can have a section with 1 student with 1 unit and 1 credit unit in the end. Or you can also have 200 students taking 3 units. So that's 200 times 3 is 600 credit units. Now what that means is that it is possible to cut 600 sections, theoretically, and to add 1 and to have it be equal. So net reduction of 599 sections can have no impact in terms of enrollment. Now I understand that's on a theoretical level because we don't have 600 one student, 1 unit sections. But nonetheless, the point is that it's sort of a how long is a rope argument. Is if somebody says, how many ropes do you have and how long are they? Well, they're as long as they are. A section is as big as it is. It's a useless measurement in terms of coming up with too much of anything. And the section, 1 student section can cost $1,700. The other one can cost $5,000. Okay, and that's $8.33 per student. So it just shows that there's a huge disparity between the title of section. Okay, now the distinction between FTS. FTS discusses and enlightens us in terms of revenue. And what happens is you go up to a cap. Once you're at the cap, that's as much money as you get. You can shoot past the cap, and to the extent that you do, it's fine. There's no penalty for going above cap, but you're still only paid at the cap level. The question that it answers is, how much do we earn? That is the purpose of full-time equivalent students as a metric. Okay, the second one is sections. Sections deal with total cost. So you're going to spend a certain amount of money on sections. If you reduce sections, you're going to reduce money. Okay, but the amount of money that is spent only answers the question of the total cost of sections. How much do we spend is the question that's answered. And there's not a particular necessity to go between those two. There's no requirement that says that you have to balance sections in any way with FTS. They answer two completely separate issues. One is the earning and the other is the expenditure. The more important one is enrollment, which is the primary goal. So with enrollment, that's the number of students that actually enroll in the total number of sections. Doesn't matter what that number is, you can increase your enrollment. And in fact, you can keep going on past, and there's no limit at all on what the enrollment can be. And the question that is answered is, how many students do we serve? That is the metric that we ought to all be focusing on for the students. So how many students can we enroll, and what's the amount of money that we have available to spend on sections? And let's make sure that we hit the cap number so that our revenue for apportionment is met. Okay, the student access, you can see that number's remained relatively stable at about 180,000. Student success, it's actually been creeping up, and the available resources have gone up and now is dropping like a rock. Okay, but what you can see is that we have managed to maintain student access and success despite the available resources dropping. The key part that we need to focus on is the gap between those. And that turns out to be 22% of our enrollment are students who get a D, an F, or withdraw. In numbers, that means roughly 40,000 students who enroll do not succeed in their class or withdraw. So that number, the Rose Bowl holds about 90,000 people. If you were to double that, have two Rose Bowls, that's about 180,000. Now, the Rose Bowl is people, and we're talking about enrollment, so you can have one student with multiple enrollments, of course. But the point is that it is an enormous number, 180,000. The trouble is that 40,000 is 22% of those enrollments do not succeed. And that is something that we need to focus on as a college to reduce that number, because ultimately that costs us, because a lot of those students will come back for another try, but in any event, they're not succeeding at what they intend to succeed at. In terms of the budget itself, 2010-11 we started about $120 million, had a $6 million reduction, we had a $2 million reduction, both of which were planned. We had the February surprise, and now we're working on next year's budget reduction. So altogether that's about $17.4 million. That tallies up to about 15% in a very short amount of time. Overall funding, you can see the academic salaries at 50%, classified salaries. Now this is broken down somewhat different from what we normally do. This is the major objects. So the classified salaries 20%, benefits 21%. Add those three up, it's 91%. Then what's left is supplies, $1.5 million, operations about $9 million. Operations include such things as travel, insurance, utilities, so on, any number of different operational needs. Capital outlay, which is basically capitalized equipment, so equipment that is carried on the books as capital equipment. Okay, now we've talked about this one too in terms of 11-12, what the various options are for cutting the budget. And probably $500,000 in the nipping and tucking, $1 million in unfunded positions, and $1.3 million in unused adjunct pay is what we're shooting for in order to come up with that $2.85 million cut. For next year, this does involve structural change in order to come up with 6.5, and we'll talk a little bit later about that. Okay, now a different way of viewing this is if you were to include the benefits with the different groups. In class, 51% of our budget is spent in class. Non-instructional faculty, so counselors and librarians, is 6%. Classified is 26%, management 8%, operations 8%, and supplies 1%. If you were to imagine taking 15% of that chunk out, You can, now I'm not proposing that, but you can see what a chunk it is. That you could take out 15% out of classified, you'd be left with 11. You can't even take 15% out of the other areas. You could take out all of managers and all operations, and that would do it. Of course, you wouldn't be able to operate the college. So the reality is that you can't do it out of a particular group. What has to happen is the pie just shrank, and therefore it needs to come out of all of it. In terms of the budget shortfalls over an 8-year period, okay, this is on the assumption that the November ballot initiative of the governor will not pass. So you start out, and our high water mark in 2008-9 was about $125 million. Okay, and then what you can see is that it shrinks over time rather rapidly. Assuming that the governor's budget does not pass, you end up at about $104 million. Okay, what that means is that we will have lost $26.6 million in that period of time because these cuts are cumulative. They add 1 year onto the next. And it would mean that over the next 4 years that you're going to have $45.9 million in additional cumulative cuts for a grand total of $72.5 million. Now, on the assumption that the governor's November ballot measure does pass, then it cuts it down to $52.5 million. So you can see that obviously there's a difference. This also assumes that there will be no additional cuts after this year, and we have no idea whether that'll be true or not. It's almost certain that the budget won't increase, but it's conceivable. These are theoretical numbers. Capital outlay projects. The three that people mostly point to are property acquisitions at $4.4 million, asbestos abatement. And asbestos abatement, so that everybody understands, could be used in a moment's notice. If there's an earthquake right now, the R building is likely to be closed because the ceiling is asbestos and the fireproofing is asbestos. And it wasn't that long ago when we had a leak in one of the, a few years ago, we had a leak over one of the computer labs on the 4th floor, and the computer lab got shut down because we have to bring in asbestos abaters, close it down, do all the negative air, do all the testing, clean it all up, clean the carpet, wipe everything down, so on, replace ceilings, replace fireproofing. That $2 million can disappear as quickly as an earthquake strikes. U-building replacement, that ship has pretty much sailed, so what you're left with is $6.4 million. Remember that our cumulative cut is $52.5 to $72.5 million. Therefore, if you were to look at this chart again, that is the area that could be filled in with the $6 million. So basically, in 1 year, we went from $125 million to $119 million. There's the $6 million. This is the reason why you have to make structural changes and why you cannot spend one-time money for an ongoing problem. Cost per FTS, we've talked about this. Now, if you see the coloration from the yellow, green, yellow, orange, and red, it does show that there's a trend. And then when you see that in this students per section, you can see that the trend is not 100% true, but there is a trend line to where the most efficient sections are the ones with the greatest number of students per section.
Could you go on the previous slide? I was actually asked some last week, so I kind of missed this, but why is CEC considered so expensive there?
Well, and I pointed this out last week, is it's somewhat unfair because this is per credit student. They're all credit students, and at CEC there are very few credit students in cosmetology, but because it's a center, there's a lot of overhead that's associated with the center. So they have counseling, they have all the office expenses and so forth. So that number is somewhat unfair because there's a whole non-credit side as well.
Right, and the only credit program at CEC is cosmetology.
Right.
So that really is a
That's correct, but then I mean, it's more than somewhat unfair. It's completely distorted because you're assigning all the costs over there. I don't know exactly how you calculated this, but I did just a little bit of research, and as far as what we bring into the college, it's over $4 million and what we spend is about $2.5 million, roughly. So we're actually bringing in, I don't know if this calculates that, but this is really quite a distortion. And even the next slide where you point out how many students per section, again, cosmetology is, 85 enrollment. In the spring, it's 85 enrollments out of 5,063 enrollments.
Right.
So really, you should change that to cosmetology and then CEC, because the impression given is that we are costing the college lots of money, and it's my understanding that we pretty much pay for ourselves, at least, if
Okay.
not bring in more. So,
And that's fine. That's not truly what the point of this is. The point of this conversation has not much to do with CEC, but it does have to do with the concept of, and let me just do this one here, has to do with the options of how we actually do the budgeting and counting for sections. This is the issue of the 428 enrollments in the 45 sections that were cut, 9.5 students per section. So the previous actually leads to this following conversation. The cost of those is $120,000. The second option moves over those same number of 428, but then what it does, furthermore, is it adds 52, so that your capacity becomes 480. And you can do that in 14 sections with 34 students per section, and the cost would be $54,000. So the point of this is that there is actually a way of increasing enrollments and access to students while simultaneously reducing expenditures. And that is the model, and that was the point of the previous, is that there is a direct correlation between the number of students in a section and the overall cost of the section. Okay, in terms of the dropped programs, these are the 45 dropped programs, and these are the 14 added programs. So you can see, and maybe Bob can speak to, either one of the two Bobs can speak to the importance of those 14 sections and why those 14.
Do you mean dropped courses? Or
Dropped sections. The 45 that were dropped.
Okay.
Yeah, these are the infamous 45 that were dropped for low enrollment and other reasons. They averaged approximately 4 students or something like that, if I remember
A
correctly.
number of them were,
Yeah.
altogether I think it was about 9.
It was 9 students. They average about 9 students per section. We replaced those, and Dr. Bell can talk to the spring forward sections and the completion agenda, but we added those 14 courses. They're currently averaging about 24 students per section, and we will not close those sections until census, which is on April 14th. So that's approximately a week from now. So those will eventually probably be adding additional students, and the average will go up. So we went from 9 to an average of 24, and those 14 are targeted for completion agenda students, and they're the spring forward group. Bob, is that pretty much it?
That's pretty much it, yeah. All those are high demand, typically high enrolled courses, again, that meet a completion agenda, and when we mounted those, the expectations were that those classes would fill very near capacity. I anticipate one of the reasons we're not at capacity now is we just didn't have sufficient time to do an effective job of marketing these classes as thoroughly as we probably could have.
Okay, so the added courses are the ones for the spring forward?
Yeah, and the majority of those are offered on Fridays and Saturdays, Friday afternoon, Friday evening, Saturdays. So if we do this again, that really is a weekend college concept, then we would market it that way as weekend college and promote it in a much greater way. So right now we're averaging a little over 24 students per section, but I anticipate that will go up a little higher.
Because today is the first Friday.
Today's the first
Correct.
Friday, and we go to the 14th, which is obviously next week
Dave?
sometime.
Yeah, I guess I'm not understanding. The ones that are dropped, are those people that are actually in the classes that dropped actually went to the spring forward?
No, and I don't have the correlation there. My point is that in the previous slide I said 45 sections were dropped, and then we added 14. And you can actually serve as many or more students in the 14 at a significantly reduced cost.
Right, so we had 45 served an average of 9. We dropped those. 14 are now serving an average of 24.
But it's kind of misleading because you figure that if those 45 students in there is actually taking the classes, then you haven't hurt anybody. But you know, you added new people in those classes. And you've increased class size. Is that correct?
Alex?
To be clear, I want to make sure and ask Dr. Bell this question is the students that were in those classes, in those sections that were dropped, were ultimately contacted with the Spring Forward section, so we do have a lot of crossover. We expect a lot of crossover there, though not all students that were in those drop sections came back and said we want to take those classes for various reasons. That was a process that was undertaken, and you did discuss that with myself and Ashley at some point.
That's correct. The classes that were mounted in Spring Forward, of all the classes that were canceled, every one of those students, there were 428 students who were directly impacted by those class cancellations. They were all contacted, advised of the classes that were being mounted for Spring Forward, and given the opportunity to participate. Now, some of those students had found other classes in the normal course of doing what they do before we got Spring Forward in place, but every student who was directly impacted was given the opportunity to enroll in any of those classes in Spring Forward. Many of them availed themselves of that opportunity, some did not.
But they all got first dibs.
They got first dibs, and if they requested, they were in. And then the second group were students who are close to completion, 1 or 2 classes away from completion this semester. They were given the second level of, if you will, priority opportunity to enroll in the class. So there's some crossover. I don't have those exact numbers of the number of students who were in the classes that were cut, who are now in the Spring Forward classes. There was some crossover. I don't know how many, but they were given first opportunity, and many of them availed themselves, but there was a large number who just simply didn't want to do it, couldn't do it because of scheduling and a number of other issues.
So at the moment there are 336 students being served by those 14 classes, and probably, I'm trying to remember the numbers, but at one point it was 50 or more that were part of the drop group that had the completion agenda need.
Yeah, that's close.
Clarification, it is also my understanding that student services also enrolled many of these students themselves, so the students didn't have to necessarily go through the enrollment process, at least for some of these students.
That's correct. We outreached all of those students. If they indicated they wanted to participate, they were, if you will, batch-loaded or hand-enrolled in those classes. Those students didn't have to do anything. We went through the process of the first and second, if you will, priority tiers of students and made sure they were all enrolled. Then we opened it up for general student enrollment, and that occurred the Wednesday before those classes began, that following Saturday.
Now, the point of this is that rather than, doing a postmortem of what took place, this is actually the framework of a model that you can offer greater access to students for less money. And ultimately, when we're dealing with a $6.5 million budget cut, that is an important point. Danny, you want to say something?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you that you can serve more students cheaper, but these classes, it's my understanding, were closed at least 2 weeks before the semester started, so nobody else could enroll. And that's why they were lower.
Okay, and again, I think we talked about that before. I think that what you find is that the most high-demand courses fill up more quickly, and the lower demand ones tend to fill up at the very end, not necessarily out of student interest, but out of sort of panic that they need to maintain their 12 units for financial aid, for their visa requirements, or any number of other different things. I think that it is true that you can assume that organic chemistry, because it closes within a day or so, we could surely use more of. And the ones that are, and we should offer more of those sections. That is a part of this process, is trying to understand which sections are the ones that are required by the students, and then to focus on those and to add them. So when we're talking about adding sections, you can add sections while doing so without a negative impact.
Right, but I think you have to have all the facts on the table if you're going to analyze a situation and try to figure out how to make it better. So I think we ought to acknowledge that those classes were closed, I don't know what it was, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before the semester, just so the fact is out there.
Okay.
Because, is that true?
That's true.
Yeah, and I think that's been acknowledged several times in several other meetings.
Tom?
I just wanted to say that I'm really glad that it was decided to add Nutrition 11, whoever made that decision, thank you. It's content required for licensure for our registered nursing students. It's not a prereq, but it is a requirement of the program. If they get to the end of the program and they haven't completed that, they can't take the state board. So I'm very glad that you added that. It's a high demand course for Health Science Division.
And if I may, to that point, those are really the guiding principles that we use for adding all those courses, high demand courses for students needed in any capacity to get to completion. And so that's why those were chosen.
Thank you.
Okay, Kevin, you want to ask a question?
So hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Clinton. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes?
Excellent. So a big problem I have with this list is there's several things that don't match up for me. One is, while I had no intention of participating in Spring Forward, I was not contacted in relation to it. On top of that, my class actually is not on that list. It was a sociology class at Arroyo High School, and it was dropped entirely. It was canceled. I ended up getting another sociology course, which was nice for me. But as far as I knew, that class was full when I checked it before it got canceled, and it was canceled in its entirety. I managed to find another sociology course on campus. I got very lucky, but it didn't. It was one of those classes that was dropped 2 weeks. I actually got notification of that during that February period, but it's not on this list. Also, on top of that, there's the $120,000 that this list apparently saves. And there's also, I don't understand it. $120,000, well, I understand that's a lot of money, and I understand the reason that you did the initial dropping of these classes is they were empty. However, I'm not part of this list. I was part of another list with a full course that was in fact dropped. It was canceled. I got a notification email and everything. So can you please explain to me why there's an inconsistency of the 45 classes here and what I'm facing as a student who actually had his class canceled?
Okay, and the point of this meeting is budget and resource allocation?
Yeah.
But what I'd encourage you to do is to talk to either Bob Miller or Bob Bell about the issue.
Actually, no, this is still within the thing because my course was canceled in regards to budget reallocation.
Okay, but
If I may, Mr. Chair, I'll answer that question quickly. The high school classes were canceled as part of this original cohort. Every one of those high school classes were restored and are in operation now. Every one of them were restored.
Really? I mean,
Yes, really.
was it on campus or just restored in high school?
In the high schools.
Okay, I was not notified about that at all.
Okay. Well, for that I apologize, but those classes are in operation right now.
Well, I know why. Dr. Cable is working on notification for this, for students, so it's already being worked on. It's not a problem. But yes, thank you for the information.
okay, so moving on with the presentation here. In spring 2011, 219 sections ended with fewer than 10 students. And in those 219 sections, there were a grand total of 1,000 students enrolled in the end. That's 4.6 students per section. Okay, now, again, this is how you divvy up your resources. So if you figure 1,000 students in 219 sections, that's 4.6. If each one of those sections had 30 students per section, we could have served 6,517 students in the same 219 sections.
Why has that been allowed to happen? I mean, someone certainly has the authority and the insight to realize what a total waste of money that is.
Well, and that's precisely the point of this conversation, is it is possible, if we focus on resolving the issue, that we can serve more students with less money.
But I think it's also, to really respond, Tom, we have not drilled down into what those courses were. And sometimes they're performance classes, sometimes they're independent study classes. There are things probably within that skews that number dramatically. So before we all jump to a conclusion that what that slide says is really what happened, we have to analyze it. But I think what Dr. Van Pelt is trying to point out is that overall conceptually, we need to take a look at these things that maybe we haven't looked at very much in the past, and now we need to take a look at those things in relation to the strategic enrollment management as that relates to how can we maximize students' ability to complete and move on.
Now,
so these are all things that have to be looked at.
Realize this is in one semester. There were in the same semester more than 500 that ended with fewer than 20. Now, and I realize there are reasons, but you're talking about 20% of our sections end with fewer than 20 students per. So as Bob just pointed out, yeah, there are reasons, but the truth is that we can do a whole lot better and we can operate more efficiently.
Right.
And I think that is beyond dispute. Now, the other option is that you could reduce 186 sections and you could serve the same number of students. So again, in terms of resource management, and we'll get into this and the reason why these concepts are important in a minute. Let me just finish just real quick. I'm almost at the end here. We had one section that started with 7 students and ended with 2. Okay, now, there could be reasons, but that is not that terribly unusual. Or you could have a normal closing number of 30. Suppose that the room would hold 40. Okay, and what happens is that you end up, well, on the first day with 30 students who are enrolled show up, and then a number of other students show up as well, hoping to add the class. Then what happens through whatever process is that an instructor will accept certain students and bounce out other ones because, they want to maintain the closing number or whatever it is. Okay, but throughout the course of the year, the overall number of students who do not complete or do not complete successfully is 22%. Therefore, one of the options is that if you were to accept more to start with, you're going to end up with something closer to the normal closing number probably halfway through the semester. The net effect of doing that is, again, you can serve more students for the same amount of money. Okay, and the last point before for this section, do out-of-state students displace in-state students? Okay, if we were to add a section for $5,000, it would take 8 out-of-state students paying their $218 per unit times 3 units in order to offset the cost of that section. But the fact is then we could add another 22 in-state students. So if the issue for us is that out-of-state students, and that doesn't necessarily just mean F1 visa students, it could be, a student in Florida. It doesn't have to be a student who's on campus either. It can be a distance ed student. But the bottom line is that it doesn't take that many out-of-state students to create an opportunity for additional sections for in-state students. And again, increasing the enrollment. And I think I showed this one as well, is that we could go up to, and in this case the 6,000, you have to divide by the number of semesters, intersessions, trimesters, whatever the unit of measurement is. But 3,000 out-of-state students would create a net $10 million to the bottom line of the budget. And when we're talking about a $6.5 million budget problem, that's significant. Okay.
That represented both, F1 and out-of-state.
Any out-of-state. All out-of-state students pay the $218 a year. Okay, and Dustin, you had a...
I sort of already answered my question, but are the numbers that you're putting here, that 4.6, is that the number of students at the census date, or is that the number of students that are on the list at the end who haven't withdrawn? I'll ask the question another way. Do we lose money if a class has 30 at census and then ends at 10?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
But I think that what is true is that we have not served students very well. Is because what will occur is those students then have to recycle through the process. And that's what takes the extra time, because essentially what they're doing is they're taking up a seat. Is that if we can get students to go into a section and successfully complete, then as they move on, their seat becomes available to someone else. So, it's another one of those efficiency issues that we have to pay more attention to successful completion in terms of the limited resources that we have.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any, Dave?
Yeah, I guess my question is like you said, you could take away 182 classes or whatever, and you could increase the class sizes on the other end. But that's assuming that the students that would have taken one of those 182 classes that you dropped will enroll in a different class, is that correct?
Yeah, certainly that is true, and that's a part of enrollment management and instruction is to calculate which, and I don't think it's, from a business perspective, it's not that difficult to do. And the way that it occurs is that sections fill. The highest demand sections fill most quickly. The lowest demand sections fill least quickly. And I don't think it's terribly difficult to figure out which sections need to be added at a certain point and which ones the students, if it only fills up, and I realize there are some exceptions, like when you have to do in music, when you got to do a, what do you call that?
Performance classes, auditioning classes.
Audition.
Right.
So I realize there are anomalies in this, but speaking in generalities, we all know that we need more organic chemistry classes, but we're somewhat limited by the number of OChem labs that are available. In terms of English and math, it's possible to figure out which sections are in the highest demand, and which ones are in medium demand, and which ones are in low demand. And I think that our mission is that we need to figure that out and offer as many high demand sections as we can.
Well, I do know that other colleges, what they were doing is, adding people to a wait list, and if they got enough for another class on the wait list, they would just open up another class in that section, rather than having the people add them to their class.
And that's somewhat difficult because a lot of times students choose a section because of their time that it's offered, and just by adding a section doesn't necessarily make it convenient for the student to take either. But the bottom line is, and we're not enrollment management, the point is in terms of resource management, we need to find better ways of being more efficient with the dollars that we have available. So and I think that it's all of our goal in this room that we maximize the availability of sections to students by maximizing enrollment while simultaneously balancing our budget. Kent?
If Brac were to endorse this plan to increase the number of enrollments, that would interface though with the Enrollment Management Committee, and they, I think they set the NCN. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. But let me, because
that's not correct.
But I'm going to get to because I don't want to wade into the weeds of enrollment management. But what I do want to do is to come up with a concept for how this can work in just a few minutes. Because I do have a methodology I think that will be able to work for next year.
I know I sound like a broken record here. Isn't like offering high demand classes and canceling low demand classes, isn't that the job the deans were supposed to be doing since the college started?
And let me get into that one in a minute too. Because I think there is actually a way to get through this to where,
people have not been doing their job. If you've got a certain class that fills up right away and students are calling you wanting it, and you've got another one with 4 students take it, it seems like a no-brainer that a manager would cancel the 4-student class and add the other one. And why haven't deans been doing that?
well, and there are other complexities involved in terms of faculty load and so forth. But again, I really don't want to wade into the weeds of...
I think it should be reflected in their evaluations. Okay, so that's just my opinion.
Duly noted, Dr. Bell.
This is being recorded. I will go back and review the tape.
Okay, now, go ahead.
About the present, just 3 quick things, hopefully pretty quick. Number one, I object to them putting up it as CEC, those numbers.
Okay, I'll change that.
Okay, thank you. Secondly, I would appreciate the data upon which those slides were derived, so that I can look at the data and just determine where it came from. Because what I discovered over the last couple of weeks is very different from that. But again, maybe I'm misunderstanding, so I want to have some access to the data that they were calculated. And the third thing is, it appears to me that the CEC, the non-credit programs plus cosmetology, which is a credit program, bring in roughly $4 million to the college, and we are budgeted roughly $2.5 million. Is that accurate?
I'd have to look at that. I don't know the answer.
Okay, but there are 4 major categories for CPC.
Yes.
Is there any other place in the budget that money would be allocated to the non-credit program?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so if I calculated those right, that would be right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just to finish up the conversation and the one that's been going on, this is the year-end budget reallocation issue, and I've come up with 4 conceivable options, and we've talked about 2 of them here, I think. This is the status quo, which is basically at the end of the year, whatever funds are left over would be reallocated to non-recurring, basically through capital outlay. That's the status quo. Option A is that we split, and only 50% goes to capital outlay for technology, scheduled maintenance, and non-Measure P projects. 20% would go for off-schedule raises to employees. 20% would increase the cash flow and reserves in order to create a 3-month reserve. In this case, 5% would go to departments and 5% would go to a graduation fund. So that's option A. Option B, which was my initial one, was that, and the department should say 10%, not 5%. So 50% again for capital outlay, 20% for off-schedule raise. And realize, by the way, because the subject came up last time, is that the compounded COLA, or let's say cost of living, that has not been funded through a COLA, is 20.5%. So since the last COLA was given by Sacramento, costs have increased. The cost of living has increased by 20.5%. So in terms of, if for every $800,000 that's left over, that's about a 1% raise or thereabouts. And it'd be an off schedule because it's non-recurring, because of course these are non-recurring funds. So, I think that there's an off schedule raise to mildly offset a 20.5% ongoing cost of living increase. That seems reasonable. But so 10% would go to the departments. Okay, the third option for change would be the 50% capital outlay, drop out the off-schedule raise, and 25% to the departments, and I just really messed this up, didn't I? And 25% cash flow and reserve. Okay, so those are the 4 options. And does anybody have any points that they'd like to make in regard to that? Dave?
The departments, what are they going to be using the money for?
For anything that they would please. It could include additional lab techs. It could include equipment. I mean, it's for projects. They're non-recurring things that a department can use. And the idea is to encourage departments to carry over funds. Because, as we all know, there's a tradition at PCC that for the last few months of the year, departments that have excess funds spend them. And I think that if employees were incentivized to not spend money, and if departments were incentivized to not spend money for the greater good of the organization, but yet they didn't give it all up and they could use some of it the following year, I think that it could be a cultural change at PCC that could help in terms of the overall budget. Kent?
In our discussions in the Management Association with regard to, I think it was option A and option B, at the time we didn't know about option D, but there was great interest in having the departments have about the 10% share as in option B, and that's because we thought that the departments would be able to decide on what kind of innovations or extra activities or instructors or aides or whatever that would be best to help the students from start to finish. The graduation fund we looked at as being a bit more designed to help completion students, but we thought that the departments would be able to be sensitive to the needs of the students from the start, with maybe some early start programs, counseling, those kind of things, as well as through the process of their education here, and then also at the end. So we thought that rather than having it split 5% for departments, 5% for the graduation fund, that 10% should go to the department so that they could design programs that could be start to finish as opposed to just the finish.
So the net effect could be the same. Anybody else? I would like to come to some resolution on this prior, and I don't expect any money to be left over at the end of the year, by the way. And part of the reason why is the funds that could be made available, and I'll hand a document out here in the end, I think are going to be taken up in the $2.5 million February surprise. Bob?
So we know that 90% of our money goes to people, either salaries or health and welfare benefits, right?
Right.
Roughly 90%, 89 to 90%.
89 to 91.
Okay, roughly. And so what we're really talking about is having 10% to operate the college for everything else.
Right.
So now what we're really talking about is that if there's any leftover monies at the end of the year, how those leftover monies would be allocated.
Right.
And since all the departments operate on shoestrings in every which way you can imagine, my personal opinion is that if we gave 10% to the departments just to try and do the business they need to do, even though in most cases they're desperately trying to do that business now, or that because they are, I would think that's very reasonable. I think it's an important budget principle that would be worth putting in place.
So you would prefer option B?
I would prefer the 10%, at least the 10% would go to helping to run the institution for the benefit of students. I could be talked into more, but 10% would be my minimum.
And you're okay then with the 20% off schedule?
Yeah, I guess I am. I get that. And can you explain what the off schedule is again? That's the inflation factor, that like the 21% COLA. That.
Well, the difference between on and off schedule.
Right.
Or that's what you want?
Well, explain that too. I think I know what that means, but maybe the whole group doesn't know what that means.
An on schedule raise means that salary charts go up. An off schedule raise means the salary charts stay the same.
Right.
However, then there'd be a percentage increase one time.
Right, and it's a recognition that since people have not gotten raises for several years, that there's some way to deal with the inflation factor of 20-something%.
Now, truly, Sacramento owes us COLA. Okay,
Right.
There's a statutory requirement to give us COLA. It's just they keep suspending that.
Right.
Because they don't have the money. Now, at a certain moment, what needs to occur is that COLA money needs to come from Sacramento
Right.
to pay for the increased cost of living. The cost of living is not just employees.
Exactly.
The cost of living applies to the entire operation here, because everything that we do is more expensive. I mean, you just see running shuttles.
So
Okay, a few years ago, the price of gasoline was $2.50, and now it's $4.50. Okay, well, that impacts our shuttle fleet. So our prices are going up as an institution, and our employees' costs are going up as well.
So if we have a 20% off schedule, define where that money would go.
Well, and the proposal that I would have is if we had 20%, for the sake of the discussion, and this will not occur this year, but suppose there's $4 million for round numbers, 20% would be $800,000. That typically would amount to about 1%, or whatever that number turns out to be. Therefore, each employee would get a 1% off schedule check.
Got it.
Kent?
With regard to the off-schedule, non-recurring compensation for employees, the Management Association, in our discussions, had a little bit of concern with the salary portion of that piece of pie, only because I think it was largely due to public perception of this. I think it could be easily understood, however, that because we've gone without for so long, all employees have gone without so long, I think it's not a big stumbling block for the Management Association. But they did want to express their interest in making sure that the benefits, at least, would be the same. And benefit costs do go up.
Well, and you're exactly right, and that's one of the options that we could do. But I do want to catch Alex, because I know you're under time pressure.
Right. So I do want to say I appreciate and acknowledge the work that departments do here on campus for students, and really the innovation that's been brought forth, and I'm sure will be continue to be brought forth. With that said, however, I would say that my own opinion leads me to believe that option A is the preferred one from my conversations among students. And that is because the graduation fund gives kind of a more tangible, it gives us more of a tangible feeling that something is going to be done in terms of guaranteeing that transferable courses, high demand courses are going to be done. I understand that departments can do a lot in helping not just those students that were already going to progress, but those students that may not have progressed were it not for perhaps some innovations that departments do. With that said, I think the graduation fund, at least as of right now, from where I'm sitting, is the preferred option for students, for at least 5% of that to go to graduation fund. And with that said, would it be appropriate to make a motion so with that said, I'll move that this committee adopts option A for the budget cycle.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it for the purpose of discussion.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
So can you tell us again option A? Spell it out for us again.
Option A.
Can you put it back?
Yeah, and as long as I'm doing that, I suppose I should probably change it, huh? One moment, please. Oh, no, this is the correct one.
That's correct.
Okay, this is option A. So that means 50% to capital outlay, 20% to non-recurring employee, 20% to cash flow and reserve, 5% to departments, and 5% to graduation fund. Okay, is there any further discussion?
Okay, so when you say non-employee, recurring employee compensation 20%, that you're saying that we get a one-time check?
Yes.
Something, we get some, the teachers will get something.
Off schedule, yes.
Everybody would, all
Right.
all the employees.
Right.
Just for, sorry.
Ben?
Just for clarification, even though it's off schedule, it's not part of salary base, it's still a negotiable item. So it may not occur, or it could occur, but it's negotiable. So it couldn't,
Couldn't be imposed.
it couldn't just be imposed. And we don't want to create false expectation on July 1, everybody's going to get a 1%. And so we have to be careful that that it's not part of base salary, and it's still negotiable. So we don't know what the outcome is going to be.
Right.
We just need to keep that in mind.
And since it says compensation and benefits, it may very well be at the negotiation table that both sides would prefer that to go to benefits.
Yes.
For example, as opposed to
Well, the students.
check.
Well,
But benefits tend to be recurring.
okay, well, we have a whole bunch of administrators here. I mean, I was on a negotiating team years ago, and it seemed to me that because the teachers aren't willing to strike, what usually happens is it's administration that says yes or no, we're going to give you a raise. So when we come to negotiations, are you guys going to say, oh, well, we need that 20%, we can't give you that 1% because we need it somewhere else, and we know darn well none of the teachers are going to strike, so it doesn't matter?
No, but I think that the point is that this would be a recommendation to the Board of Trustees.
Because the union's not going to say, no, don't give us the money. It's going to be administration that's going to say, no, you can't have it.
Okay, but this is a group that would make a proposal to the Board of Trustees that would say, this is our recommendation for how to deal with any year-end unspent funds. Now, again, I think that for this year, this is going to be an academic conversation, because I don't think there's going to be any money left over. But the point is, I'm trying to work into the overall budget planning a principle by which we agree well ahead of time that if there is unspent money, how we can deal with it.
Yeah.
So we have a motion and a second on this one. Further discussion?
Again,
Okay.
if you don't mind. First of all,
Just one second. When do you have to leave, Alex?
In a couple more minutes, in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Well, first of all, my biggest concern is that 70% is still in capital outlay and revenues. I think that should maybe be cut back to between the two of them 50%. But then on top of that, I think we ought to also remember that although, again, it's high 90s, 90%, whatever it is, low, the percentage that is allocated for personnel here, employees, That's the budgeted amount. But much of this excess that ends up at the end of the year is because that money isn't expended on those personnel because we don't hire those people. So those budgeted amounts are a goal or whatever, but that's not what's actually spent. And so a lot of this excess is the money that isn't spent on employees.
Right, and I'm going to get into that one. I can do that one next. So let me get into that one too. Dave?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, if you can explain why the capital outlay is 50% and everything else is lower.
Well, right now, capital outlay is 100%, so capital outlay would be cut by 50%. The reality is that the only source of funds that we have for scheduled maintenance, that means if a roof has to be replaced, the money comes from somewhere. We have never budgeted that in the ongoing expenditures for the college. Now, as I keep pointing out, it is possible that we do that. We reduce everybody's budgets by however much money it needs to be, and maybe it's $4 million a year. So it would mean that, on a base of $100 million, all departments would have their budgets cut by 4% in order to allow for the proper funding of, like, roof replacement. The L building roof next door just got replaced. Okay, well, that's an expensive process. But there's no choice. Kent's in the building. Bob's sometimes in the building.
Yes, sometimes.
Usually not anymore. But, you have to maintain the buildings or they fall apart. In terms of Dwayne Cable's personal computer system that he's trying to work out, that's just millions of dollars as well.
I love you guys.
The fact is, it's one way or another, money has to be made available for these one-time projects. So this is a 50% reduction in how we've ever done it before. Now, yes, it's also 20% adding to the cash flow and reserve, and that's because the state seems to increase, and I think that this year we have the real possibility that our auditor will not allow us to carry forth as a receivable the deferred apportionment. Because when you start getting into October, that is not a current year receivable. And that means that our financial statements get adjusted. So the bottom line is we actually have to pay our bills and we have to make our payrolls. So to the extent, and I think that once we hit 3 months, that's likely to be comfortable, but the state keeps pulling more stunts. So the redevelopment districts, we should probably, the redevelopment districts were disbanded. We're expecting maybe $150 million into the system. The governor's already proposed that he take that money too. So he would reduce our apportionment by that same $150 million. If he left it alone, it'd be possible for that $2.85 million to be fully covered by the funds that could stream from the redevelopment agencies.
Could we just quick review what the other two options were, just real quickly before we vote?
Okay, and the departments, read that bottom number as 10%, not 5%.
So the graduation fund goes away there.
Graduation fund goes away. And the third one is to take out any off-schedule employee and to and read cash flow here as 25%. Dustin?
Could I propose an idea? Not an amendment yet, but an idea. Is it possible to reduce the capital outlay to 45% and give the Management Association the 10% that they think is important and maintain the graduation fund?
Say that one more time.
To lower the capital outlay to 45%, move that 5% over to the management, request for more to go to the departments and maintain the graduation fund.
Certainly you could propose that. I personally would oppose it, but you can propose it. I think that giving up 50% is a lot, but I don't think that it's in the best interest of the district to do that. But there's a motion, there's a second, and
One more question, if I may. On the cash flow reserve, if we drop that to 15% and go back to A, I guess, and make sure I'm looking at the right one there. So if that one went down to 15 and we ended up doing the departments at 10, what would that do to this scenario?
it's another option. There
You can put the numbers in.
are infinite numbers. Keith?
Yes, I wonder, how is the graduation fund? What does that do?
As of right now, and as it has been explained by the district, it will bring forth new courses, high-demand courses, for transfer specifically. And considering the backlog that we have as students, we kind of view that as a more tangible way of helping us through the process right now. As I acknowledged before, I think what the departments can do is great. And however, I will say, as the position that I know from AS so far, that is why I put forth the motion, and I would be behind this. And what Professor Hanvey proposed, I think, is an option that we would like, as well as what right now Vice President Miller also proposed. I think moving some of the numbers around to keep that graduation fund would be, at the very least, mine, and I can say AS's preferred option.
Okay, now, in the interest of fairness here, because you got to go, well, let's do a vote on this one, and if it passes, fine. If it doesn't, let's hold it over till the next time, because I want to be fair to your input, and we don't do proxy votes, so.
Can I make one final comment about the graduation fund? Also, considering the current the Student Success Act that has been introduced by Senator Lowenthal, it doesn't provide any sort of funding to expedite transfer requirements for students. So the graduation fund will also help us be able to uphold the amendments to the Student Success Act while, because they didn't allocate any sort of funding at the state level. So it would be, because the Board of Governors is asking us at a local level to make these different changes in regards to moving students through the process of transferring, the graduation fund would, again, just be exponentially helpful for that.
No, I guess just to be clear, I guess one of the bigger points that I guess Hannah just touched on is just that any new funding that we will be seeing will be going towards things like going to help students that are already in the process, kind of like what departments have already mentioned. So any new funding will already be going there to counseling, or to innovative ideas to help students, tutors, and the like, and will not be going to classes. That's what has been stated by legislatures when we visited them. That is what's kind of been floating around right now. So I think that's why. Like I said, though, if this body does not feel comfortable with that, that's perfectly fine. I'm just glad that we can have that conversation and put it through the process.
Okay, let's just have a vote here, just so that we understand. Voting members are everybody over here, the two of us, and the 3 faculty members over here. Okay, so there's a motion, there's a second, because Alex has to leave. All in favor of the motion, if you could raise your hand. Okay, so that's Bob Miller, Ben, Hannah, and Alex. Opposed? Raise your hand. Okay, so that's the majority. Okay, so we're going to carry this over till the next time. Is that all right?
Just that we feel like we need more discussion.
Okay, that's fine. We'll agendize it next time, because I don't want to rush through this, but I also want to be fair to Alex.
Yeah, can I get some more information on this graduation fund, what it actually is going to do, what is involved in it, and is it in place right now?
Okay, so let me carry that on too, because I really do want to be fair to Alex. So next time we're going to pick up this discussion, and we'll keep going, all right? And that'll be one of the questions, and I'll ask Bob Bell to answer that. Okay? Is that fair to everybody?
Explanation of that was done during a board meeting, and I believe that's been videotaped, and that's available via the web, and you can listen to that discussion in its original content if you wanted to.
It's also on the PCC website, 100% transparency. I think if you click on Bob's or the president's message, it also explains that in there.
Okay, if we can have the lights back on here. Okay, I promised Dustin just a minute ago that I'd do another handout here. Okay, so that we understand what we're looking at, this is the operating statement for the fourth quarter that ended 2010-11. So the date on this is August the 3rd. So this captures fiscal year 2010-2011. All right, now what you'll see is The column that you'd probably be most interested in will be the dark green one that's dollar variance. So the second one from the right. What you'll see is that in terms of the revenue, the state revenue, we captured $1.2 million more than we expected. Okay, the total revenue is about $1 million greater than what we expected. Now, aside from a few items such as non-resident tuition, local income, a few relatively minor ones with pretty nominal differences, these numbers come from the state. So and they're adjusted continually through the year by the state. And in fact, they can be adjusted after the fiscal year's ended by the state. So they can do an apportionment. They can do a mid-year cut after the year. So what happens, and it's very, very difficult, we get numbers in August from the state of their best projections of what the revenues will be. Okay? We then build those numbers directly into our budget without any adjustment. During the course of the year, things change. You'll see tax allocation secured roll. Okay, that was $1.6 million more. That's property taxes. We have no control over property taxes. At the end of the year, we find out what we got. Therefore, what occurs is that after the year has closed, we get to figure out how the year ended. Okay, so we ended up with $1 million more of revenue than we expected. You'll see academic salaries, we underexpended by $1.1 million. Classified salaries was $361,000. The benefits we overexpended by $215,000. Supplies we underexpended. Services underexpended. Capital outlay underexpended. And then the outgo is the year-end adjustment. Okay, so the net effect is you can A, see how complex this is, and B, you can also see how unpredictable it is. And you can see that we don't maintain control over a big chunk of this. And at the very end of the year, after the fiscal year has closed, when all the adjustments are made, then we get to put out a sheet like this and do a post-mortem on how the year ended. By the time the year has ended, it is way too late to make adjustments through the course of the year because the year's already been closed. That is one of the great challenges in doing budgeting within the system that we currently have. And while it may seem that from one year to the next we keep screwing up the budget, the reality is that we maintain very little control over a big chunk of the budget. So when fiscal was closing down the books of 2010-11, in the third week of July, we were swinging around probably $3 million one way or the other. And it would change from 1 hour to the next hour. So in this case, Odessa would call me and say, I think that we're going to end the year $700,000 to the good. Okay, and then a day later she'd call and say, I think it's going to be $1.5 million. Another few days later, it's going to be $2 million. As different component parts of the books close, then you actually do the final calculations. Then the year-end adjustments are made. After the year-end adjustments are made, then you tally it all up and the books are closed. Those things occur in a week-long period, 3 weeks after the fiscal year has closed. And I don't know how to ever fix that. You cannot predict it in any way. So when you're talking about these non-recurring things that pop up, and they might pop up year after year, the revenue itself, you can see, is $1 million. Now, bear in mind one other thing, too, is that halfway down the page, you'll see SASE. SASE was $1 million. Okay, we made a decision as an institution, the board approved, that we would overexpend by $1 million this year. Okay, and you can see that our revenue was the budget was 119, and our budgeted expenditures was 120. Exactly $1 million different, right? Okay, that was because the board approved a $1 million drawdown on our ending balance in order to do SASE, which was intended to modify the way that we delivered service to students with various different one-time projects. Okay, so if you took that out, what you'd find is that academic salaries, classified salaries, that difference could have been $1 million greater had SASE not been there, right? So
I'm not following that. Sorry.
We expended $1 million more than we took in. Those $1 million were expended either in academic salaries, classified salaries, employee benefits, supplies, services, not so much capital outlay. It was in one of those other areas that we overexpended $1 million. Had that not occurred, then it's possible that the academic salaries would have even been lower, that the variance would have been greater. See what I'm saying? Altogether, those variances would have increased by $1 million. But we overexpended because we drew down our ending balance. The point is that this is a very complex process, and it is a process that is very difficult to control. So we're sitting here, whatever it is, 11 weeks from the end of the year, and we have not the faintest clue how we're going to end the year. Not a clue. Now, my prediction is, because we intend to tap into the similar pockets that we're talking about here in order to come up with $2.85 million for the February surprise. That might mean, and I hope that it's true, that we might have more money coming in revenue. That's conceivable. If that occurs, that helps us out. The problem is that we're not going to know that until the third week of July. But it's also possible that we will be underexpending, and right now fiscal is tracking this. For instance, the adjunct pay, because we have fewer sections. Because the 45 sections were cut, and therefore that's $70,000 less. Fiscal, what they do each month is they cover the adjunct faculties by moving money out of what's called the distributed reserve. So there's a $19.3 million distributed reserve that funds all adjuncts in all divisions. And it sits in the 1000 cost center, Bob Bell's cost center. Each month, fiscal goes through there, draws that down, and applies it to cover the payroll of all the adjuncts in all the divisions. Right now, that is tracking probably $1 million low. Now, there's another thing too, Marie. Can you explain the 13 months that we had last year?
In the past, the health and the welfare was the payment for the June was being captured in our books for the next fiscal year. That has been historical practice. So last year we decided to book all the health and the welfare the way it should be. So last year we had 13 months in there. So this year we will have 12 months. Because it should technically be 12 months, but we don't know when it all started before. That there should have been a year when they had only 11 months. And we keep on deferring 1 month to the following year. So we tried to correct that deficiency last year. So everything now is in order, that what we see on our health and welfare is all the benefits for the health and welfare for the current year.
That's the bill, the cost.
Yeah,
the costs. We had a 13-month year last year. And that's another problem, is when you're comparing one year to the next, every time there are anomalies. So if somebody can remember that last year we had 13 months just because we had to do an accounting adjustment to make up for it, well, that's great. Chances are in 3 years nobody's going to remember why there was an anomaly this year.
But isn't it much more difficult because the health costs from the carriers, they don't operate on a fiscal year. They operate from January to December, right? But our cost is based on...
But it's even worse than that, Ben, because the open enrollment is in September.
Right, that's what I'm saying, it's compounding.
Okay.
The problem's compounding.
And when your open enrollment is in September, employees get to make adjustments in
That's right.
September. Okay, well, that's a quarter of the way through our budget year.
Yeah.
Okay, we can't control that either. So these things fluctuate, and there's no possible way to control this. So it is not a matter that we sit around and try to plan having a year-end unallocated pot of money. This is how we allocate it. It's just that we cannot control it. And I keep pointing out, too, that we budget for each and every employee who is currently on staff to remain on staff throughout the course of the fiscal year. That is never true. The problem is we can't predict who's going to leave, who's going to retire. Unfortunately, the board's being redone now because we've had several more people who died while they were here. That occurs too. Well, all of that is completely uncontrollable and unpredictable. Danny?
Yeah, well, if we spent 13 months worth of health and welfare benefits last year, that's ongoing money, then 1/12 of whatever we spent last year should be applied to this year. Whatever we need to save for this year, we spent 13 months, and we're only going to have to spend 12 months this year. So whatever 1/12 of that amount is, should be able to subtract from the, I don't know what we're at, 6.1 million or roughly. So let's
And
remember
that might be true, but what's more likely to be true is because we do essentially a status quo budget, it shows up as a variance to where we overexpended on benefits. So when you see that we overexpended here by $215,000,
where are you?
total employee
Okay,
benefits,
yeah.
that's probably how it occurred. So what that means is that it accrued to last year, and we would have had a greater overage had that not happened. What we tend to do is we tend to expend and to replicate our current year budget and to change the dates and to roll it over. What I'm about to propose in a few minutes is changing the dynamic of how that takes place in order to create far more freedom for the individual divisions and departments. But I hope that this helps to show people what the dynamics are for this year-end amount of money and why it occurs from one year to the next and why it's different from one year to the next. The numbers are always there, thankfully. The reasons are radically different from one time to the next. Any other questions on this? Okay, let me move on. Let me do this one next. This one's...
I'm sorry, I'm still looking at those benefits. So we spent $24,800,000 on benefits over a 13-month period.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And we overexpended what the budget was. So if we hadn't had that 13 month, we would have been quite below what was budgeted. I mean,
Well, and unfortunately, you also have to take into account that the under-expenditure benefit also has to do with the under-expenditure on the academic and on the classified sides. Because to the extent that there's a vacant position, then there's also a savings in the benefit.
Right. Thank you. That's
Okay, now this document shows a tremendous amount of detail. I will also tell you that Fiscal spent a big chunk of the week producing this document. One might think that you push a few buttons and this document spits out. This is a hand-cranked document because our systems cannot do it. Okay, so what this shows is it shows a great deal of detail of where all the money was spent. You'll see that this is fiscal year 10-11. And it breaks it down by division. And within the division, within the classifications of the division, so the instructional with inside the classroom, non-teaching instructional, the classifieds, the managers, and other expenditures. So the 4,000s, 5,000s, so the services, the supplies, and so forth. Okay, for a grand total here of $116 million. Okay, now, here's what I would propose that we start to contemplate is that if we were to take the 180,000 enrollments that we had last year, and we make an assumption that we will not diminish enrollment, which means that there would be no negative impact for access for the students. That we, in spite of the budget reductions, we will maintain that enrollment number. Okay, but suppose then that what we do is we take this bottom line number, and we've had several cuts to this, of course, already. That number for this year is likely to be $110 million. So that's already a $6 million reduction. Okay, and then there's likely to be another $6 million past that. So next year's number is likely to be $104 million. But what we could do is we could divvy up in a similar way that the Business and Computer Technology Division, you can see here, is $5 million. Okay, and we apply whatever adjustment needs to be made in order to balance the budget. But then what we do, which would be radically different, is we give essentially a block grant to Business Division. and we say, here is, I don't know, and pick a number, $4.8 million. And then it's up to the division to spread that money. So they have to produce their pro rata enrollments. And their pro rata enrollment would be the same as it was this year. So if they had 10% of the enrollments, so say 18,000, I have no idea if that's true, but say it's 10%, and 18,000 enrollments they have to produce for $5 million or $4.8 million. Then it's up to them to work out the class scheduling, the size of the sections, and so on and so forth within that division in order to accomplish the goal for the amount of money. Typically what occurs is that I end up being the budget police, and fiscal does, of saying you're going over budget. Okay? In this case, here's the money, divvy it up. You must produce 18,000 enrollments. That means that the impact on the students would be 0 or enhanced, while we would be able to put the onus of spending that money on the division. Dan, you want to say something?
Yeah, you were saying enrollments, but don't you mean sections?
No, I actually fully mean enrollments.
Right, but they can't cut enrollments, they can only cut sections.
But you can adjust the size of your sections.
Okay.
So what I'm saying, yeah, and you weren't here when I went through that, but I specifically mean enrollments. I don't mean FTS. FTS is for income. Sections is for expenses. Enrollments is the impact on the students. So if we maintain the enrollment level where it currently is, at 180,000 or whatever that number is, and each division gets their pro rata piece of the pie, but there's an expectation that the impact of the budget cut cannot therefore hit the student. It means that to the extent that the English division would like to reduce its normal closing number, that's fine, on the basis that they figure out a way of still maintaining service levels to students. Now that might mean that other sections are larger. It might mean that certain sections are taught cheaper. Doesn't matter. The bottom line is, if you see what the English division is, English is $6.3 million, right? Okay, so here's $6.3 million. English division, you have to produce 25,000 enrollments. Knock yourselves out. It's up to you. Now, what that would do is it changes the entire budget dynamic of how we do business. And it does it on several levels. The first level is that we've insulated the students from the budget cuts. The second thing is that we have taken out the central control of the budget, and we have distributed that down to divisions and departments, so that each division and department gets a block of money, and then it's up to the division and department to expend that in the way that it needs to be expended.
Would this amount that was of the piece of the pie that was distributed be readjusted every year?
Well, and I think it has to be. But I think that's part, and the other part of this is that this then would tie enrollment management directly into the budget process, because that total enrollment number would come from enrollment management. So it doesn't come here, it comes from the instructional side, enrollment management. So if enrollment management says, we need to, instead of doing 180,000, we need 185,000. Okay, that number then comes to Brac, and we end up distributing the budget with 185,000 goal in exchange for however many dollars we distribute. It's also possible then to say a division, and for instance math and English, they can have different numbers for how much it costs. But it's also possible for math division to be far more effective and efficient in expending its funds. Okay, so then what you can end up doing is you can make adjustments along the way of saying, English, you guys have to become more efficient. And I have no idea if that's true. But social sciences, we know social sciences is efficient because their average section size is 55. Okay, therefore the cost to teach a full-time equivalent student is about $2,000. Okay, now is there a big difference between a geography class and a social science class? And the chances are not. But it allows for far more granularity in working out the budget without it being centrally controlled. Dan?
Okay, let me see if I can get one detail that started at the beginning. You're assuming I think an $8 million cut next year, and you're proposing on doing across-the-board cut, saying, okay, everybody, your budget is gonna get cut, this percentage, everybody, right across, and you make the best of it, and you do it most efficiently. All right. Now, I can see, that's kind of like when the water companies try to force people to conserve. And they said, okay, everybody's taking 10% cut in your water, and if you use more water, you're going to have to pay a lot more. And that penalized people who had been conserving before. And it rewarded people who had been expending their water before. So if you do it this way, that means that divisions that are already efficient are going to be cut to the bone, and divisions that are a little profligate are going to get rewarded because their cuts are going to be a little easier.
They're a little what now?
They're divisions that are...
I want to learn a new word.
Wait word.
No, and I realize that that is one of the weaknesses of doing it strictly across the board. The trouble is that we basically have 11 weeks to propose a budget, and there would be a tremendous battle in telling the math division that you guys, kind of suck, and we're not going to give you the money because we think that you're kind of fat and happy. But the library, on the other hand, you guys have been running absolutely to the bone, and therefore we're not going to touch you. I do think that eventually we need to work out a metric to provide more money for divisions and departments that are running more efficiently. The problem that I have is that what I'm proposing today is a radically new way of doing budgeting. I will also tell you that the current way that we're doing budgeting is universally unfair. Not only is it unfair, but it's universally not understandable. Because what basically happens is we've got a program that is an in-house program, and you spit numbers through it, and we have the fiscal people and Anthony who work their fingers to the bone trying to put numbers into this thing. And in the end, you just hope that you got it right, because it turns into a massive document, and we all know that it's imperfect when it's first printed. So there's no perfect way of doing this. I appreciate that. I'm just trying to come up with a methodology of getting through this budget morass without it negatively impacting students, and to where we decentralize the control of the budget out to the departments and divisions.
The columns here, 4, XXX5, XXX, what is that?
The 4,000 series of objects, the 5,000 series, and the 6,000 series. So
what are those?
So the 5,000s are going to be the operations. The 4,000s are going to be the supplies. The 6,000s, Marie, are the capital outlay.
Okay.
That's capital equipment, as I pointed out earlier.
Now, what do you mean, like operations? What does that mean?
Operations is all the utilities, all the insurance, all the travel, all the consultants, all the software.
Utility.
Yeah.
So like it's our share of the electric bill? Or no?
No, what you'll see is that the electric bill is mostly in admin services, so there's a huge amount in admin services, $6.5 million. Okay, well, $3 million of that is the utilities, and then the insurance is there too. So the majority of admin services for $26 million seems like a lot, but there are some huge numbers in there that are just the utilities and the insurance. Go ahead, Bob.
This is only 01? Or just 01?
This is 01, yes. This is the unrestricted general fund. Dave?
Yeah, a question on the instructional classroom. Evidently, that's the teachers, is that correct?
That is the teachers. What else does it include?
The adjunct, the 1,300.
Okay.
The adjunct and the certificated.
Okay, what's the non-teaching? Is that their office hours?
No. Non-teaching is mostly librarians and counselors. The way that the law is written is Byzantine. It's essentially written for K through 12. Because there's no universe that is logical that would say that a librarian and counselors are not a part of instruction. That might be true on a high school level, it's certainly not true on a college level. But we live by the same rules as the high schools is what happens. So what they say is that 50% must be spent in the classroom, and then they have very defined rules for what that constitutes. So you'll see the non-teaching is the librarians and the counselors. Who else is included, Marie?
Anybody who is non-instructional.
But is certificated.
Right.
The other thing is, when you're saying that you're going to give them the money, evidently the benefits, they have nothing to do with that. Is that correct?
No, that's not true either.
So they do?
No. But the reason is because there's a difference in benefits between adjunct and full-time. So what it means is that yes, obviously if a person is full-time, their full salary need to be budgeted. And then we will create the formula for how much of the benefits, and that needs to drop into place. So yeah, it's not possible for them to say, we'll hire more people, we're just not going to give them benefits. No, that's a part of the equation, and that's still 90% of the equation. But it allows a division to say, here's the most efficient way that we think we can spend the money. We provide the block to CEC. There you are. Here are the expected results. Tell us how you're going to do it. And budget for you, just fill out the forms, and that's the budget. Bob?
So, Dr. Bell has got the 19 million for all the adjunct money. The CEC, for example, instructional salary is $3.5 million. A big chunk of that, because there's so many adjuncts at the CEC, was in Bob's $19 million.
These are the actual numbers, though. And that's a critical point, and I'm glad you brought that up. These are actual numbers. Okay, so what happens when the budget is established? This year there's $19.3 million in Cost Center 1000.
Right.
Okay, and that's in a distributed reserve. Each passing month, fiscal moves over all the money to cover all the salaries and all the checks that were written for adjuncts. Okay, by the end of the year, this is what we have.
Right. So that explains the big part of the difference. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. Dustin?
I guess this is a question for Bob. This is more of an enrollment management question. But for this to work, of course, I'm just going to use my division as an example. If we were going to take a look at, say we got $6 million for English, and we met as a division, wanted to figure out how we could be more efficient. Is there a way that a document or documents could be distributed to Amy, then given to all of us, that we can see maybe where our classes are not closing quickly enough, or where we are inefficient? So as a division, we have the data that we need to really make a wise decision about how we can best spend that $6 million.
Yeah, absolutely. We've already created the lists of the, if you will, the courses that are most wanted by students based upon past history. We have data that tells us exactly what the needs are relative to at least student choice. So we could basically slice and dice the data any way that you needed to help you with these decisions.
And with the new AIS, you can be able to set up a dashboard on your departmental screens and be able to keep up with that on a dynamic basis, so you'll know minute by minute once that data has been built.
And that's the course-taking behavior, if you will, of students. And that's a big part of how we're going to get to the completion agenda, and a big part of how the dean, if this type of system was put into place, working with their faculty, would be able to allocate whatever the number of. In other words, if they have an enrollment limit of 1,500 that they've got to reach, they can figure out the most efficient way to do that based upon student course-taking needs and the completion agenda.
So, we talked about the dollar-based budgeting. This ends up being dollar-based budgeting, but it provides a great deal more detail than what I brought the last time. And how many days did it take, and how many people did it take to do this, Marie?
I had 3 people working plus myself 4. It took us almost 3 days.
Dwayne's AIS will fix that.
Well, that's true. That is another reason. The AIS, the lack of it, is killing us.
Right.
This is an extremely labor-intensive document, but this ought to be a document, because this is the first time anybody's seen this. Okay, but the reason nobody's seen it is because it's such a pain to produce. And it should be, push 3 buttons and this thing comes out. All the data's in the computer, we just can't get it out. So does that help in terms of how we can, and I'm curious to know what the overall sense is in terms of the mission of maintaining enrollment while giving the departments the discretion to spend money in order to produce their own local results. What do you think? This is a huge, huge change. And in terms of the budget, it's probably the biggest budget change in 20 or 30 years. Silence is golden, or what?
But it's a great idea. It may not be the perfect solution, but it's certainly better than what we have.
Yep. There's a learning curve that we have to factor into this, so
Yes.
we have to. This has got to be very carefully rolled out. I can see a meeting or two that Dr. Bell has with his deans to try to explain it, and there's a big learning curve here.
Well, this is a big change for division deans.
Right, huge.
Because the division dean now becomes responsible, as opposed to admin services is responsible to produce a budget. The enrollment management produces the goals, and the resources are distributed, and we'll come before the committee and say, here's how we propose to distribute the resources. And then this would occur in the relative near term, by the way, because then we have to walk the division deans through this so that they can then understand the process and to work with Bob in terms of class scheduling, the two Bobs, class scheduling, enrollment management, try to balance this. But what this also does for the very first time is it absolutely connects planning with budgeting in the most direct manner that I know how to do. Ben?
Well, I like this also. I call it performance-based funding, but I think in this kind of methodology, the conversation becomes broader. It forces the leaders of that department or division to look at every variable: staffing, temporary help, supplies, how many passes by. I mean, the conversation expands. It just gets out there to cover everything. It forces you to do that, which is the cultural shift. So I like it.
Which, Tom, it gets back to some of the points you made earlier about managing certain issues.
Well, see, here's one thing that seems like it might be missing with this is there have been, in my opinion, deans who have poorly managed things like with the courses they offer and so forth. And I don't know that there's something built into this that compels them to use it efficiently.
I suspect that if they don't make their numbers, let's just say the level of transparency has been magnified 100 times based upon this new system.
It raises a sense of urgency also, I think, for the deans. If you keep raising the deans, I think it will cause them to have a greater sense of urgency to look at everything that's within their realm.
Because if they're not meeting the targets, it'll be obvious, and the question will be why, and then we'll have to dig in to figure out what's going on. And enrollment management, it'll be a big change for us too. Dr. Bell's office is a big change for them. We're going to have to really manage the process.
And the only thing I would add to that is to go back and reemphasize the fact there's going to be a significant learning curve for the deans and the faculty on how we build schedules and load schedules. So it will be a learning curve, but it makes a lot more sense than what we currently do.
Otherwise, what ends up occurring is that we create a dictum of, here's, thus saith the Lord. And then everybody goes around and starts whacking their budget. One of the things that I really despise is budget whacking, because it's just taking a machete to a budget, and there's this does require a scalpel to get through what we need to do to excise things out that we don't need, while not impacting the things that we do need. Kevin, you want to say something else?
Overhearing this, I actually really like this idea. I'm sure there's going to be some kinks and things to work out with it, but as we have now, we know that the budget's not working, and an experiment is always something that we should take. So even if this fails, it's worthwhile as a learning, as something to learn with, and this is a way of dealing with the problem as you brought up, which is connecting planning and the budget for each semester. So yeah, the main thing I'm worried about now, especially as far as division deans are concerned, is will they be able to handle all this new material? We have a division, you're a dean, right? That's not
Oh, no, I'm not a dean.
we have a dean. Because I would love to get up to the dean, because this would affect them directly, and budget's rather complicated. I know they do a lot of work, but if they can handle it, that'd be great. I think we'd actually get some positive results. So this is definitely worthwhile for experimentation, is what I want to say.
Okay, thank you.
And our response would be to that, this has been previewed with the deans, not introduced at any grand detail level, and they all remained in the room when they heard it. So I think they can embrace this, and I think they will be able to. Obviously, it's going to be a learning curve for them.
Dave?
Yeah, we're in fiscal year 11-12, correct?
Yes.
11-12.
This is for 10-11?
10-11.
Okay, so this is last year's budget, not current.
No,
this year.
we had to go, because of these distributed reserves that we have, this is the document that we have that's of a complete, the last document, the document of the last fiscal year that we have available.
Okay. So
Until this year closes.
As it closes, we booked in July.
Then we could do another one of these, and it would update this. And each time, of course, that bottom line number gets smaller. But what it allows us to do is to, and we'll have to work on this pretty quickly, is to come up with a methodology of distributing what we anticipate, which is even more difficult. We don't find out what our budget is from Sacramento until August. We have to have a budget in place July, at least a rollover budget and a plan. The final budget will be adopted by the board before September the 15th, which is required by law. But that's another one of the difficulties in coming up with a budget. We'll come up with a plan of how we're going to deal with what we expect to see next year. By July the 1st, we will actually take this budget for this year and just roll it over, because otherwise we have no authority to spend money. And then we'll get the budget numbers from Sacramento in August, and we will put the final budget together in 4 weeks, basically between August the 15th and September the 15th.
So Kent and I were kind of kibitzing, and it sort of fell in line with, I think, with what Kevin was saying. Is there any way to pilot this with maybe a couple of divisions, 3 divisions, and sort of work out the kinks?
We can pilot it real quick, but our problem is that we have a $6.5 million cut that we actually have to implement.
So what you're basically saying is this would be a way to get to that big 6.5.
Yes. Now, there's going to be a lot of hand-holding and instructing and learning, including on our part, because this isn't how we do budgeting.
Right. I guess what I'm concerned about is a systemic meltdown as everybody tries to learn this massive new approach to business, and then we end up with this massive mess.
Well, and what you'll find is that there are about 3 or 4 people who put the budget together normally,
right.
And there's a monumental meltdown because it's basically Anthony, Marie, Cindy, and I.
Yeah.
And then there's a massive amount of work that occurs between August the 15th and September the 15th that is beyond imagination of how difficult it is. So by distributing that out and preparing, I mean, the reality is that we do have until August the 15th to train everybody, and we can preload salaries, full-time benefits ahead of that. The trick is going to be tying enrollment management and instruction into our budget. Now, and it's funny that we should even have to bring that up, but we've never done that before. The truth is that our instructional component and our enrollment management components basically operate independent of our budget planning process. They always have. And that's somewhat unthinkable, but it is the way that it necessarily occurs now. Dan?
All right, if you do it this way, efficiencies rise during the year, or there's more money that comes in, does that mean each of the divisions get to keep the money that they were able to underspend?
Well, and there are two component parts of that. In the first place, during the budget cycle, they'll be able to move money around. Okay, that's one component. The second component is what we talked about earlier that we didn't finish, which is that we will come up with a year-end process to where, money is distributed so that you can carry it over the end of the year. One of the things that we got to stop doing is having this modality that you have to spend money, because if you don't, you lose it. Which means that the June the 30th, July the 1st carryover does not exist, therefore you blow your money.
Okay, but I think you are doing it this way if you base next year's allocation on previous year's allocation.
And I think that, it's not possible to solve this entire problem this time, and I think that Bob's point is well taken. There's going to be a learning curve, but there's going to be a learning curve for Brac. Because if we're going to oversee the budgetary process, then what we need to do is to have reports throughout the year to see how we're doing. And I think that it's going to be a little Pollyannish to think that, we're going to roll this out and it's just going to be brilliant from day one. But it's almost certain that it's going to be better than what we now do.
There's a large amount of processes that really have to be developed here. So we're really, you have to start with something, which is where we are today, and then I think we work through whatever processes we need to do, and then keep refining those as we kind of go through that link in the budget.
Right.
I've experienced this type, not here, in different states I've been, and the average learning curve, if everybody put their heart into it, is about 2 to 3 years before it becomes part of the culture. Because I think at the beginning, it's not the numbers or the process, it's people's mind, the way they think. That is what the big hurdle is at the beginning. But at the end, I found out my own experience is that I became a better HR manager in my department because my boss said, here's a reduction in your budget, make it happen without reducing services. My thinking cap became bigger along with my staff. But it took a year to change our way of thinking. But there is going to be a lot of hand-holding. But this is not really something that's new, but I think it's something that is needed.
It's not new, it's just new here.
Yeah.
Dave?
Yeah, what happens if we no longer have Division D? Would they distribute it?
One way or another, somebody has to manage something, right? So if it's a department chair, okay, well, fine. However it gets done, my point is it needs to be done at the lowest possible level. Not a problem today either, because we do have a budget that we have to put in place for 12-13. So what we need to do is we've got to wrap our heads around the fact that all this stuff has to mesh together. From now on, each year we need to do a better job of meshing it. Okay? Now, and we're going to run out of time here if we're not careful, so I want to be somewhat sensitive to getting out the information that we promised to get out. This is the latest version of the guiding principles and directions. The items that we previously agreed to, I don't have any new ones this time. Maybe by next time we can develop some or propose some for the dollar-based budget system. The board agreed with all three of our recommendations. The LA County election expenses won't be budgeted. And the other two were the budget will be established assuming no tax increase is approved in November, and in the event the November ballot initiative passes, a plan will be in place to increase budgets as appropriate. That's actually going to be one of the more challenging things that we do, by the way. And certainly we all hope that it does pass. That would mean, $6.5 million more to us, or thereabouts, whatever that number turns out to be. We need to start wrapping our heads around a plan of how that gets distributed within what I just talked about. And that might also address some of what Dan was talking about, that some divisions are running more leanly now than others. And maybe there's going to be some methodology that we can develop that deals with that. Okay, let's see here. This. Not quite sure what this one is.
That was the second.
Okay, no, I'll keep that one. Let's do capital, because I did promise capital. Danny requested this one. This is capital outlay by project over the past 9, 10, 10, 11, 11, 12. This is another one that Marie put together. So hopefully that deals with the question that Danny had, at least in providing the information. And let me hand out another one that was also another Danny request. This is statements in the several questions answer on the same sheet. Note 16 in our financial audit, continued reductions in deferral of cash payments will ultimately impact the district's ability to meet the goals for educational services. And what that is code for their warning that the deferrals on the state level are going to impact our financial statements and our ability, which is what Heidi White, the auditor, pointed out to the board is verbally is that there's a big impact for the apportionment deferrals. And I will forewarn everybody that the state is trying to grapple with this right now because all 112 colleges are in the same problem of what happens when you defer your apportionment so far out into October. Because what's likely to occur is that there'd be a restatement of our financial statements to where there would be an instant drawdown of our ending balance by whatever amount is outstanding. Then theoretically the following year you'd pick it up, that one, but then there'd be another deferral downstream. So what that might mean is a $2 or $3 million restatement of our financial statement to where our 18.7 drops immediately by $3 million or whatever the number is that's deferred until October. So we might end up with a 15.7 ending balance just through the stroke of a pen because of the state deferral. Okay, and let's see here. Yeah.
Can I ask you on the budget? Okay, so for 11-12, property acquisition, 4.4 million adjusted budget.
Right.
And not spent. So does that mean that we have that 4.4 million sitting in the bank somewhere?
Yes, in the county treasury. And by the way, that is one of the things that we use for apportionment deferral for cash flow. So right now, I believe our cash balance is $14 million, okay, which is pretty much on target of what we thought.
Yeah.
And we're expecting by June that it will dip to $4 million. Okay, our payroll is about 9. We will be 50% of payroll, which means that come July, there's a likelihood that we will be doing interfund borrowing in order to make payroll. And even that's difficult to tell because what happens is that there are floats that are created. Then it depends on the registration cycle of when students start paying bills. It is very difficult to predict even that, and you'd think that'd be real simple to do, and it is not. But right now, our projection is on target. We're sitting on $14 million. And over the next 2 months, that will drop to $4 million. Okay. The board meeting video. Okay, that's Heidi White's presentation with regard to the audit. And then Danny also had a question last night which dealt with district financial budgets and where you can find those in PDF form, I think you asked. So that's where they are. So hopefully that answers that. Okay, we still have just a few minutes left.
I had something I wanted to share with the committee that I'm quite proud of nursing for. So some good news, I think. Okay, so I went back and I reported at our faculty meeting about, how expensive we are, which we knew. We knew that health sciences was expensive. And talked a little bit about the low enrollment courses, which we have a lot of. And we have to have, for the clinical course where we go to the hospital, because you can't supervise 30 students. In the first semester, there's two short-term pharmacology classes the students take, and the first one is currently 3 sections of 20, and then the second 8 weeks, they all take the same course with 60. Myself and the other person who teaches the first 8 weeks, we had a discussion then with the whole team. Make a long story short, we've decided that there's no reason we couldn't take 30 students in a section, and so in the fall, we're going to go to 2 sections of 30 instead of 3 sections of 20. And we feel we can do it.
Thank you.
Then the other thing in nursing, we have our S courses, our seminar courses, which are kind of linked with the clinical course, but they're set at 10. And I talked to Dr. Freund about this, and she made the decision and imposed it, and nobody argued with her, that come fall, we're going to realign, we're going to make a few adjustments to how that class is taught, but those courses are all going to go from 10 students to 20 students. So we're going to cut half the sections of the seminar courses, which is 3, 6, that might be like close to 14 sections. And so we'll go from 10 to 20.
Without impacting the students negatively.
Without impacting the students. We're just going to do a little bit, we're going to make a minor change that will not be harmful at all.
Thank you.
So that's what we're doing.
That's perfect.
I'm very proud of mine.
Thank you.
My
Okay, are there any last minute things before we? Okay.
Yeah, I asked last time, and I know we don't have time today, but next time I would really like to go over the Fund 63 so I can understand it, because it looks like there's about $4.3 million in there. We funded at about $1.3 million. We've apparently been overfunding it, so hopefully we could reduce that, and that would be part of the savings.
And I think that okay, we'll talk about that next time.
Yeah, and then I have a proposed guiding principle, but we'll talk about that next time. Could we get current year expenditures for fund number 1, the general fund? I mean, you gave it to me for 63 and for 41, and that was helpful.
Yeah, that's a massive document now.
I know, but if it's electronic, I can just scroll through it. I'm not only needed at the page.
Do we have the ability to do that, Anthony?
A lot of work. What?
You want Fund 1?
You want the current expenditure levels on
just to see
Fund
where we
1.
are in all the accounts, but...
Now, you'd think that'd be real easy, right?
No, I didn't think it would be super easy.
How, Anthony, can you even do that?
Not just by pushing a button, no, it would have to be, we'd have to run some reports, and we'll probably put it together in an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, but see, that's just...
It's going to be something like this. It's going to be labor intensive.
Let me ask you, are you interested just in looking at...
I just want to kind of see where we're doing in all these.
Oh, I'll tell you what now. I'll tell you what might work is the 311, the operating statement for the third quarter we can produce. Now, yeah, we can do that.
Or a bottom line figure?
No, but if we do the operating statement for the Q3, which closed March the 31st, then it's going to be the same version, Danny, as this one here, and it'll show where we currently are, and you would expect some numbers to be at 75% because we'd be 3/4 of the way through the year. Would that work?
Okay, yeah, I'll take that, and then we'll see if I...
Because that we can do.
Okay.
Okay? All right, anybody else?
Could you email the presentation you did to us as well?
Yeah.
Or is it online?
No, I'll put it online. I will put it online. Okay, so we are at 2:29. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
And second by Ben. All right, is there any objection? All right, 2:30, we're adjourned. Thank you.